listener production.
Hello, happy Monday and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Sasha Barbagat. Australia's response to HIV and AIDS is one of this country's great public health successes. But now a medication shortage has people worried progress on eliminating the virus here might be under threat.
We're seeing a shortage of PrEP right across the country at the moment, but particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. And that's because there's about 390 different medications at the moment that are listed by the TGA that have been affected by a global supply chain shortage.
What the PrEP shortage means for the people who rely on it and what can be done to help coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, it's time for the headlines with Chris Spiru. Today's Monday, the 16th of September.
Good morning, Sash. Starting in the US, where Republican Vice President pick J.D. Vance has tripled down on claims by Donald Trump that Haitian refugees are eating cats and dogs in Ohio.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
This story has absolutely exploded since the debate. That's where Trump initially made the comments, sparking dozens of viral memes and TikTok sounds. Despite law enforcement from the town at the centre of the rumours, Springfield, coming out to say there are no credible reports of this happening, Vance is standing firm.
I have heard firsthand from multiple constituents, people who made 911 calls a month ago, a year ago, who were making these complaints. I trust my constituents more than I do the American media that has shown no interest in what's happened in Springfield until we started sharing cat memes on the internet.
Yeah, so while a lot of us are having fun with this cats and dogs stuff on the internet, there have been real-world impacts of these rumours. Springfield City Hall and an elementary school had to be evacuated after a bomb threat was made using hateful language towards immigrants and Haitians. And the mayor of the city of Springfield has actually come out as well, saying that the town is going through a very difficult time. He also said it'd be helpful if politicians who amplified false rumours about immigrants eating pets in his city, quote, understood the weight of their words, which I think is really important to note. And look, I did a little bit of digging, and this whole idea of immigrants eating pets is actually a bit of an urban legend in the US. So we saw this come out initially in the 80s with Asian immigration, and that was a rumour that was spread in a bunch of different US states, saying that, you know, the Asian immigrants were barbecuing pets, and there was evidence of it in rubbish bins outside restaurants and things like that. So this idea is not new. It's just morphed into targeting a different immigration group, which is really, really sad and gross. And it's also worth pointing out as well, neo-Nazi groups have been spreading these falsehoods in Springfield at the moment. So J.D. Vance was quizzed about that on the show that he was on Sunday morning US time. And he just refused to acknowledge it. So he's saying, no, this is my constituents tell me this. It's true, even though multiple sources of law enforcement have come out and said, we have no evidence that this is happening.
Benjamin Netanyahu has warned Yemen's Houthi rebels will pay a heavy price after their missiles reached central Israel on Sunday for the first time. The Iran-aligned group control northern Yemen and claimed responsibility for the attack, with a military spokesperson saying the new hypersonic missile travelled over 2,000 kilometres in just 11 and a half minutes. The IDF says it was intercepted by rockets from the Iron Dome with no direct casualties. The interception, however, did cause some damage to a nearby railway station and on open ground near Israel's main international airport on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. Houthi officials said the attack was carried out in solidarity with Palestine and that it was just the beginning.
Back home now, where two-time Paralympic gold medalist Madison De Rosario has claimed victory in the Sydney Marathon's wheelchair race for the second year in a row. The 30-year-old took it out in 1 hour, 54 minutes and 10 seconds yesterday. That's more than 15 minutes ahead of her nearest rival, fellow Aussie Paralympian Christy Dawes. And this all happens, remember, just a little over a week since she got back from Paris. Now, it was just last month that De Rosario learned of her father's passing, and this was just hours after she had led our Olympic team as a flag bearer in Paris. She went on to win silver in the marathon and bronze in the 5,000 metres at the Games. Now, it is worth mentioning as well, which is really cool, that the Sydney Marathon is actually in line to become the 7th city in the world marathon majors. So right now, that's London, New York, Chicago, Tokyo, Boston and Berlin. Berlin. Sydney is trying to become the 7th city, which would be really, really exciting. And we should soon find out if that's going to happen or not.
Oh, fingers crossed. And look, over the weekend, so this race was yesterday, there was a record 25,000 runners that rocked up to compete in the race. A lot of them were my friends, not professional runners.
Oh, yeah.
But actually taking out the race itself was Kenyan Briman Misoi. He won the race in 2 hours and 6 minutes. Now, look, a marathon, just generally, I had to look into this. It is 42 kilometres. And while some people were focused on beating their personal bests, others were looking to break records in a different sense.
Yes, and thank you for clarifying that a marathon's 42Ks, because I also have no idea how long a marathon is because I don't run marathons. Absolute power to the people who do,
power
though.
to the people that do.
Very, very
Mad
impressive.
respect.
So one guy earned a Guinness World Record for being the fastest person to finish a marathon dressed as a Roman, and I mean a literal Roman soldier costume.
Fantastic.
Running a marathon, A, sounds horrific, but B, running a marathon dressed in a soldier's outfit? Oh my God. Another guy earned another Guinness World Record, the fastest to run a marathon dressed as a ninja, and another guy won for the fastest to run as a supervillain, and he was dressed as the Riddler.
Amazing.
And another record that fell was twins from Canberra became the fastest female twins to run a marathon ever. So good for them.
And less than 9 months since the last one, the Emmys are on again in Hollywood. Now, you might remember the show at the start of the year was a delayed ceremony for 2023, and that was pushed back because of the writers' strike. So today is all about the best TV that's aired in the last 12 months. So the big ones we're looking out for are Shogun, The Crown, and The Bear, which are leading nominations.
Now, also one to watch will be probably the biggest show this year, I reckon this is the biggest one, and that's Baby Reindeer. It's up for a bunch of gongs, including Best Limited or Anthology Series, Best Lead Actor in a Limited Series, and Best Directing in the same category. Now, we do only have 2 Aussies up for awards today. Elizabeth Debicki, of course, for her portrayal of Lady Di in The Crown, as well as Naomi Watts for her work on Feud. Now, if you want to watch, it all kicks off at 10 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time today. Now, Schitt's Creek fans will be very pleased to know father and son duo Eugene and Dan Levy are hosting, which I think will be really fun. They have such a great chemistry. We saw it in Schitt's Creek, but also if you watch interviews with them, I mean, they're father and son, but they obviously quite like each other and they're funny. So it's really nice to see. So yeah, if you are a Schitt's Creek fan, that could be a reason to watch alone. Chris, thank you so much for joining us for the headlines. Next up, we're looking into a current shortage of PrEP medication in Australia, what it means and what we can do to help.
Hey, Bension here. PrEP is a miracle drug. Full name, pre-exposure prophylaxis. It's a little blue pill that you can take once a day or before and after having sex that stops 99% of sexual HIV transmissions. Basically, it makes having sex a lot safer, especially for men who have sex with men. And it's helped the rate of HIV diagnoses in this country plummet by about 1/3. PrEP has been widely available cheaply across Australia for almost a decade, in part because of the man you're about to hear from. Now a member of the South Australian Parliament, then Senator for South Australia Robert Sims successfully pushed for PrEP to be placed on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, or the PBS, meaning anyone can prevent themselves from getting HIV for about $30 a month. But now, a supply shortage has hit, with multiple brands of the medication expected to be in low supply or unavailable across the country until March next year. Robert Sims, welcome to the briefing. What has PrEP meant to the people that have taken it since it's become widely available in this country?
I think it's been life-changing for people here in Australia. When I first became involved in frontline politics in the federal parliament, at that time we were campaigning to put PrEP on the PBS because it was really expensive in Australia at that time and wasn't widely used. Since it has been added to the PBS, we've seen a significant take-up and also a significant reduction in HIV transmission here in Australia because it is so effective. It means really that people are able to have sex lives, engage in sexual activity and know that they've got some level of autonomy around their health. whilst, of course, condoms have always been available, at least over many years now, they've been readily available, there is always that element of risk. What about if you forget your condom? Some people find sex is not as much fun using a condom. There's lots of reasons why people may not want to use them. And so having PrEP on board as part of the mix, I think, has been really beneficial.
For people who aren't on PrEP or who aren't at risk of HIV who might be listening to this, why is this issue important?
Well, we know that things can go wrong with condoms. They can sometimes break. Sometimes there have been examples of stealthing and the like where people can remove condoms midway through sex. And, you're really putting potentially, if you're a receptive partner, you're putting that choice in someone else's hands in terms of whether or not they're using a condom and taking protection. And so actually giving someone the autonomy around their own health and letting them take a pill every day and giving them that level of confidence and protection, I think is a life changer for many people, in the same way that the pill was a life changer for women years ago when that became readily available. It doesn't mean that people aren't using condoms. And of course, there are still other STIs that are transmittable that, you can catch. And so PrEP isn't a safeguard against everything. But what we know is that HIV is a virus that can have long-term consequences for someone's health. And so if we can reduce the risk of people being able to acquire HIV, then that's a good thing. And I think PrEP has been a very useful tool in terms of doing that.
Why is PrEP in short supply right now, and how bad is the shortage?
So it's my understanding that we're seeing a shortage of PrEP right across the country at the moment, but particularly in Melbourne and Sydney. And that's because there's about 390 different medications at the moment that are listed by the TGA that have been affected by a global supply chain shortage. I think that might be connected with COVID. We've seen that with lots of medicines. It's my understanding that there's 4 generic PrEP options that have been impacted here in Australia. They're going to gradually start coming back on the market. And by March, hopefully that should be rectified.
Till March is a pretty long time. Is this a worry from a public health perspective? What have experts told you about that?
Well, look, it absolutely is a worry. And I think what's really critical here is that if people are on PrEP and they're running low on a prescription, my advice is they might want to allow some time to shop around, because they may find that they're running low in some particular pharmacies. They may be able to get it at others. If they can't get it, they should go back to their doctor and talk about what some of the options are. They may be able to get Truvada, for instance. My understanding is that's not been impacted, but that is much more expensive than the generic brands, and so that may not be an option for people. What's really important, though, is that if people are used to taking PrEP and suddenly they stop taking it, that they then use other forms of protection, like a condom, for instance. That's really, really important. I have heard of a report in South Australia of a pharmacy saying to someone who's gone to get their prescription filled, well, sorry, I don't have this, but I can give you this instead, which has half the level of strength or protection. That's very worrying from my perspective, because whilst the person that let me know about this didn't take the other medication, we don't want people taking products that offer them less protection, potentially putting themselves at risk, or others for that matter. So it's really important that they talk through the options with their doctor and that they plan. If you do find you go to a pharmacist and you're not able to get what you need, do try a few others and go back to your doctor and see what options might be available.
What's being done about this?
That's the question that I'm really keen to get to the bottom of. I think what it does potentially reveal, if this is going to become a longer term problem with medications in Australia, we might need to look at what we can do in terms of seeing local production of these medications in our own country or at a state level, so that we can meet the supply, because we are hearing reports of quite a few different medications being impacted at the moment, and that can have a really adverse impact for people.
Shopping around really sort of puts the responsibility on the individual, but is the government, the health departments and the systems around this country that are meant to ensure that we have the medication that we require failing in a duty of care if these aren't readily available to access?
one of the options that the government could potentially look at is if, say, Truvada is available and that's not been impacted and the generic brands have been, then I'd like to see them looking at a potential subsidy for that product as an interim measure whilst we wait until the generic options get back online. I mean, if they do that, then at least that would ensure that there is some continuity of supply for people.
Do you think that people who use PrEP have the right to be angry about not being able to access this medication right now?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of a fundamental right for people to be able to make decisions about their own bodies and their own sexual health. And if people have got used to using a medication and they've planned their lives accordingly, to suddenly see the tap being turned off, I think is very unfair. And this is a medication that can have particularly quite serious consequences if people are denied access to it. So I really would urge the government to do everything they can to try and make sure that this is available where it's needed. And certainly one of the options I'll be talking to the state health minister about is whether there is some level of state government subsidy that could be provided to people that are finding it difficult to get access so that at least they can get one product. And if Truvada is the option that's still around, maybe that could be subsidised as an interim measure.
Outside of the shortage of this medication itself, is there also a problem about the way in which sexual health services are resourced in this country? Because it is a lot harder, and I can tell you from personal experience, to get PrEP. There's a whole lot of rigmarole you have to go through to do that you really didn't have to do years ago.
I agree with that, Bension. Part of the reason why there's a lot of those hoops that people need to jump through with PrEP, and there's a regime of regular STI testing, for instance, and regular checking in with a doctor, is because PrEP is not a safeguard against other STIs. And when PrEP was first put on the market, there was concern at the time that maybe it could result in a spike of other STIs being transmittable. And so I think my understanding is to try and safeguard against that. What governments sought to do on the basis of health advice was to say, well, okay, if you're going to be on PrEP, you need to then get tested regularly for other STIs just to make sure that, you're not picking up something else and potentially passing that on if you're having sex without a condom. So that's been the rationale behind that. I have heard reports, though, that I've heard about in South Australia where, say, during COVID, they weren't having people being able to walk in and go and see an STI doctor, and then some of those services have been cut back. I am aware, though, that things are starting to come back online again now at a local level, which is good. But I worry that, in general, sexual health is not one of those areas that is prioritised by governments. We have a focus on things like ramping and the like when we talk about health policy, and rightly so. Those things are really critically important. But so is sexual health. And sometimes if things go wrong, that can have long-term health consequences for people. So it's really important that this is actually prioritised by government and it's done in a destigmatised way so that people can get access to the advice and the support that they need, particularly people in the queer community.
There are two broad ways that you can take PrEP. One is as a daily pill and the other is on demand. Can you just explain what on demand means and why people might want to do that during this shortage?
Yeah, so on demand is a different type of PrEP in that you can take it 2 hours before you have sex and then you need to take it afterwards as well. And that has the effect of, if you have come into contact with HIV in the course of having sex, then you're not going to acquire the virus. That's a really good option for people that might be thinking they don't want to take this medication every day, but they may be going to have sex with someone new or unprotected sex or whatever it might be, and decide that they want to use that as an alternative rather than, say, using a condom. So, or they may want to use it as an additional level of protection. There's a whole range of reasons why people might want to do that, but that's definitely an option, and particularly something people might want to look at if they can't get their usual prescription of PrEP.
Rob Sims, thanks so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks very much. Good to talk to you.
Robert Sims there. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you found this ep interesting, tell a friend about it or share a link. Meanwhile, you can find exclusive content from us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on TikTok and YouTube. Just search Listener Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed this afternoon from 3 with another episode. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.
Listener.